So today I'm going to talk about assembling a loom on the floor of the Science Center, where I was artifacts intern this summer. You may have heard a little preview to this yesterday during Kara's talk on collections care. She was my wonderful supervisor during that time. So being an artifacts intern at the Science Center is kind of a weird place to be that person because it's not really a collections-based institution. So I sort of had a mixed bag of things that I did, but a lot of those things were research. And one of the things that I researched was objects in an off-site storage warehouse that was being closed down during my time there. And so we didn't have a lot of room at the Science Center artifacts room to sort of take a lot of these larger artifacts back to, is that advancing? Oh, there it goes. And we didn't have a lot of room to take them back to the warehouse, so we were trying to look for alternative ways to maybe loan them or donate them to neighboring institutions. And one of the objects that we found was this Belgian loom, it says on the side. But first we need to know a little bit more about it. So we looked in the ledger book, which is our very sort of advanced way of researching things at the Science Center, and realized that we had received this loom in the 1960s, and as far as we could tell, it had never been taken out of its crate. And perhaps more interestingly, it had been taken in at the same time as our Jacquard Loom, which was famously used by weaver John Campbell. This is a really significant piece at the Science Center, as it is used on a weekly basis by volunteers, and also is really important to the history of science and technology, as the punch card system that's used in Jacquard looms to translate pattern was actually used in IBM's early patents for early computing systems, so sort of this binary idea. So as I said before, we didn't have a lot of room to sort of investigate what was in that crate. And this was during a time of exhibit development for the new Human Edge exhibit. So what we decided was we'd install it on the floor of the Science Center during opening hours. And if you've ever been to the Science Center, you would know how actually insane this is, because there's literally children running around everywhere. So we set up some, plastic partitions around the outside to try and keep people from coming in. So we cracked open the top of the crate, and we first discovered a lot of dust, as you might imagine, after it had been closed for over 40 years, and a lot of burlap, interestingly. So we started peeling away those layers of burlap and dust, and we had some soft brushes and sort of were removing dust from the different layers. And we found little bits and bobs and nails. And sort of our first clue that this might not be a Belgian loom, because we actually found a lot of these sort of paper handwritten notes that appeared to be written in Dutch. So we sort of put those aside, and we decided we would translate them later. And then as we sort of brought out different beams of the loom, we saw that the name Tilburg was actually stamped on the side of the loom, which is in the Netherlands. So also another clue that this wasn't a Belgian loom. And sadly was also when we started to realize that this probably wasn't related to John Campbell as we thought it might have been. We had a loom expert there with us who had actually studied John Campbell's loom. You can see the back of her head right there. And she had told us that typically North American looms are a lot rougher looking than this one that we were assembling. But we kept, putting it together. We wanted to see what was inside, what it looked like all put together. And this was a huge teamwork effort, because this didn't come with instructions. It was sort of like putting a puzzle together without the box. So sometimes things were, inside out, upside down. We had lots of different ideas from different people. As people walked by, we would explain to them what we were doing, and explain to them sort of the history of the John Campbell loom and how we were trying to decide whether or not the two looms were related. We had a lot of the loom volunteers who come to the Science Center on a weekly basis as sort of our little peanut gallery, explaining to us some ideas they had for how it might be assembled. And then we have it so it's almost freestanding, but you can see our little purple gloves there. We're still reluctant to let it go, because some of these pieces are almost balanced in there. It had warped over time, so we weren't sure how structurally sound it was. But this allowed us to get some nice pictures for future documentation and research. And this piece that you see here is sort of what was considered to be the most interesting part that we found in the crate, which is a sort of scaled down, more simplified version of the punch card loom head, similar to what is used on the Jacquard Loom. So this is something that's going to be researched more in the future. And then we had to decide, like, this was within 3 hours we had put up this loom, and we had to take it down because other things had to go in this hall the next day. So within an hour and a half of putting it up, we started to put it back in. And this was like playing Tetris, literally. So we strategized some ways to put it back in there nicely, and we actually reused the burlap to cushion out the pieces, and lined the crate with polyethylene sheeting so that it wouldn't get as dusty in the future. And this is where the punchline comes in. So all of this happened during the Game On exhibit, all on video games. And my favorite part was when these 3 little preteen boys came out and were like, "You're assembling a loom? That's insane!" And I was like, you know what? It is insane. We are super cool. And it really was reassuring to me, which taught me my moving forward thought, which is sort of accessibility. If you literally build it, they will come. So this sort of makes artifacts, objects, living experiences rather than static objects. And this was something that I applied later on in my internship when we invited the inventor of the carbon fiber violin to come in and talk to people on the floor of the Science Center about his invention. Thank you.